On the 26th of September, the Mount Everest region was hit by a violent storm. That night, a huge slab of ice broke away from the ridge facing the southwest face of Everest and crashed down into the valley 4,000 feet below. Half the tents at Camp 2 were flattened by the blast. The 1975 British Everest expedition was over. The leader, Chris Bonington, ordered the mountain to be cleared. They had chosen to climb to the highest point on Earth by the most difficult route, and they had made it in record time. In the steady monsoon rain, Kathmandu ceases to be a mecca for hippies. Climbers take over from the tourists. Newcomers to the team had just 2 days for sightseeing before starting the 180-mile trek to Everest. They had been chosen for the biggest, best equipped, most experienced expedition ever to leave Britain for the Himalayas. 6 of the 18 climbers had been high on the southwest face of Everest before, where 5 previous expeditions had already failed. "25 tons of food and equipment had been flown in before the monsoon broke. Now all planes were grounded by the weather, and the expedition needed 100 porters to move them to the mountain. Throughout the expedition, Chris Bonington was to carry a small tape recorder, which he used as a personal diary. It became a unique record of his thoughts and feelings from day to day.
I don't think there's any danger of ever having leadership by committee. I don't believe in it. And anyway, the team is so large that you can't really have a discussion, and people don't seem to want to discuss. Of course, though, if there's a strong consensus against what I say, I think that this is going to emerge in a troublesome sense later on. I think this is where I've got to be very receptive to the feeling of the team, so that I can basically sell them effectively my ideas and make them feel and believe that these are ideas that they have taken a part in actually forming. I think the moment one tries the old military type leadership, I don't think it can work. I think this slightly more subtle leadership, which I think can be just as positive, and in fact needs to be as positive, is what we really need on this expedition. Anyway, we'll see how it runs out later on.
Once outside the towns, Nepal is a land without vehicles and without roads.
No, we drunk it all, you bastard. Oh, fantastic. Where is it? How much is it?
After a week of walking, they reached the town of Tosi, and beer at £1 a bottle.
Absolutely fantastic.
Is this a beer I see before me?
Isn't it incredible? Well, how much...
Every expedition is partly a team and partly a group of ambitious individuals. The prize of the summit of Everest is almost too great, and long before they left England, there'd been plenty of lively speculation about who would be chosen for the final assault. Among the stars of the team, Dougal Haston's reputation seemed to put him out in front. Publicly, Chris Bonington refused to commit himself so early. But as he confided into his tape recorder, a key figure in his thinking was bound to be Dougal.
He reckons he wants to get to the top. He reckons certainly that he deserves the top and that he's certainly the best person to go there. I'm inclined to agree with him. Dougal did raise the point, wouldn't it be the ideal if he and Doug Scott were paired up? I countered this, though, with the fact that I couldn't possibly put the strongest pair together right at the beginning. I'd much rather Dougal making his summit bid, as I think he probably will be in a position to do it, in conjunction with someone like Braithwaite. And it's simply a matter of making sure he has partners who are not going to let him down.
For Doug Scott, this was his third attempt on the southwest face of Everest.
I mean, when you're here, you want to be at home. And when you're at home for 3 days after the trip, you're about ready to go back again. At one time, I thought it was a paradox that I got to live with. But it's not. It's just a fact of life that when things are comfortable, you want them. A bit of adventure. When you've got adventure, you start thinking about comfort again. And it's something you just have to live with.
The path to Everest runs due east from Kathmandu, crossing a series of great gorges which plunge down to the plains of India. The route lay across steep ridges, sometimes as high as 12,000 feet. Each afternoon it became a race to reach the campsite before the heavy rains began.
Where's the tea then? Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, very, very good.
Actually, on all the expeditions I've been, the food we've had so far is
Bloody fantastic.
yeah. So it's really good.
I think there's a serious chance of us not making it if the stuff's like that.
Well, I don't know. I think the approach march gives one more of a chance than anything to get really fit. I wouldn't miss it. But this is so different from last time, isn't it, Nick? I mean, last time we had the first day was fine.
It rained almost.
And it rained every single day until the day we got into Namche Bazaar. And everything was wet, and it was a real hassle.
Failed.
Yeah.
Pretty bad for India, but it's not bad for the Everest expedition.
We're round about the same as the Japanese were in 1973. But they, of course, were caught they ran out of good weather on about the 3rd of October. And by that time, in theory, we could be in a position to make a summit bid. But that depends on the kind of weather we get in between.
For the final stages of the march, the expedition was going to need 100 climbing Sherpas and as many as 400 porters. To control this small army, Bonington had gone against local tradition and appointed the youngest Sirdar ever to go to Everest, 28-year-old Pertemba.
Pertemba's terrific. He's totally and absolutely one of us. He's a real climber, I must say. It'd be good if him or one of the best Sherpas gets to the top. I'm sitting and trying to fix it that it happened that way.
Bra. 13 days after leaving Kathmandu, the expedition reached the Sherpa village of Kunde at 12,000 feet.
don't think there should be too much risk of any of these bottles being blown. Do you, Hamish?
Well, we'll soon find out, won't we?
Their first concern was the state of the oxygen. 5 bottles had blown inside the lorries on the long journey from England. There was a real danger that the rest might have suffered as well.
Do you open it?
I can just throw that in there for the...
Where are the stuff bags?
Oh, we're just doing that for the moment.
What kind of pressures are these designed to burst at, the bursters?
5,000. We'll do this one because this is the kit.
Yeah, that can actually go to be put away.
Yeah. You stick this one inside.
Could I have the knife, please?
Is it boys who've got the knife?
Yeah.
Fancy spreaders. Fancy spreaders.
Yeah.
And tin. So, what about these stuff bags here as well?
We got some.
Well, yeah. No, we'll see.
Ah.
That looks all healthy,
No
doesn't it?
problem there, is it?
3,300 psi.
But when I heard that those 5 bottles had blown, of course, having actually supervised the packing, I thought, my God.
That's what I thought.
Was it my fault, you know, that the things had
That's
gone?
Italy's. How were they packed?
Yeah, I know, right. So thank God it wasn't there.
If the rest of the bottles had been faulty, then the expedition would have ended here.
We'll chat. So. And one rucksack, eh? Yeah.
Every Sherpa had to be equipped to the same standard as the climbers themselves. Across a counter in England, the cost would be nearly £1,000 per man.
Back. Got it? You were suffering from a fever this morning.
Well, gentlemen, welcome to the annual board meeting of British Everest Expedition Incorporated Limited. I think I'll just keep it as short as possible and go very briefly through the immediate plan as far as the kind of grand strategy on the mountain goes, and also on the actual composition of the members of the different lead groups on the mountain. I'd much rather leave this until after we've climbed the icefall, because then I think it'll A, be emerging how different people are going, and B, will have spent much longer together as a single group as opposed to 2 separate groups. One can very easily, I think, get over impatient to be out in front and helping the expedition, doing your thing and being all involved, particularly in the icefall. But I think it's a real mistake to try to rush it and force yourself more than your own body tells you. But I think this business of acclimatization, I think it's something that only the individual can decide for himself. I mean, if you're going really well, there's no ready point in staying back acclimatizing. But if you feel you need it, and you do need it, it's lunacy to press on. And where there's stacks enough of us for people to be working in the icefall and other people to be resting and acclimatizing.
Long before climbers began to come here, even before it was known to be the highest point on Earth, Everest was already a sacred mountain. Perched on a ridge at 13,000 feet stands Tangboche Monastery, once one of the most important in Nepal. "12 miles to the north, the climbers had their first view of the towering ramparts of the southwest face. But before moving on, they paid their respects to the head lama.
So we should like to present you on behalf of the expedition, from all the members, climbers, as well as Sherpas, these small tokens of our respect for your monastery and yourself.
On August the 22nd, base camp was established. Built amongst the rubble of the Khumbu Glacier at nearly 18,000 feet, it looked on that first day about the most desolate place on Earth.
I must confess I feel somehow a little almost frightened, I think. Suddenly it is very much, my responsibility, holding the whole thing together, keeping the whole thing moving. And yet I think I've got a really good team who will back me up to the hilt. Everyone seems to be prepared and wanting to help.
To reach the southwest face, a route had to be found from base camp up the Khumbu icefall to establish Camp 1 at 20,000 feet. The icefall was potentially the most dangerous area of the whole climb, a frozen cataract, 1.5 miles long, composed of gigantic blocks of ice and slashed by deep crevasses. For newcomers like Alan Fife, it was a first chance to get to grips with the mountain itself. Base camp was rapidly growing into a canvas shanty town.
I'm afraid not. Your wife is living it up in the south of France. All these wild Peruvians. How'd it go anyway?
Well, it's easy a little bit.
Well, I think probably it's certainly going to take us tomorrow.
Right.
And I think it could be another day, in fact.
Oh, it
before we've got
may well be.
Yeah.
Oh, good grief, look at that.
And that's coming straight down your line, I think. Whatever we do, we just must work right across to the right. I mean, anyone in that area would be smashed.
If you walked right up underneath the cliff and then skirted round it, hiding in the cliff.
Yeah.
And then cut straight back right.
It's very foreshortened from here, Dougal. You see, when we went round,
Yeah, I know where
it's round what looks like the biggest serac, right?
Yeah.
But actually, there's about 2 other corridors going right before that you can't really pick
Which
out
in
from
actual
here.
fact, what are quite wide corridors.
Yes.
Which are,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
I can believe that. I think in a way, a single serac, is less threat than at the present,
Yeah.
that big avalanche bowl, which... Here's another one coming, I think. Where's that? That's from somewhere really high up. Yeah. What, you really need big ladders behind you all the way, don't you? Yeah.
Now, do you have the bolts, Chris? Thanks.
Once the best route had been found, the next step was to make it safe for the Sherpas.
Down here, middle section. If Siler can stand at the other side, I think he'll be better. Do you say pterodactyl was the thing, Alan?
Yeah, pterodactyl, get the plates off. But remember, Dave,
Yeah.
put a bolt in
To stop
so that
it moving.
you don't lose the centre section. You shouldn't have to take any nuts off.
Well, what do we...
How do you get the plate off then? Oh, they should only be hand tight.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's it. We'll just put that in there for the moment. Stop it moving. Till you get the thing emptied up, is it? Okay. Okay.
A week after this ladder was secured, it was buried under the debris of a huge avalanche which came down from the west shoulder of Everest, sweeping away 400 yards of the carefully prepared route.
Hold it. We'll push down and you heave up, eh? 1, 2, up. Right.
We can't give you much more, really.
That's about it.
Down at base camp, Chris Bonington suddenly found himself at the center of an impromptu ceremony.
Pertemba poked his head through the door of the big box tent and said, "Ah, Barasab, you're needed." And I was hauled out, it was obviously some kind of ceremony, and I thrust into my hand a plate on which was a bottle of rum and rice around it, and a scarf, a silk scarf, which was placed over the plate. And the rice and the sampa was flying thick in the air, and the Sherpas were cheering, and some of the climbers had come out as well, but they were all ushered away. They hadn't got to get in the way between the shrine and Sagamantha, Everest, the holy mountain. It was a very fine ceremony, a mixture of laughter and tears, and I must say I hope it does protect them all.
Carved on the boulders near base camp, a reminder that Everest has already claimed 23 lives. Most of these have been Sherpas caught in the icefall. Of the climbers who have come to the Himalayas from other countries, 1 in 10 has died. Even on the lower slopes, the danger is there. As the Buddhist ceremony came to an end, it was noticed that a young deaf and dumb porter was missing. Immediately, search parties spread out across the glacier.
Roger, you're a bit indistinct. I understand that there's no sign of him, but there's bits of his clothing by the stream. Is that right? Over.
Yeah, that's correct.
Roger, okay, listening out.
They're right out of sight from here.
Yeah, oh yes, they're well down. You see, Charlie Clark's group and Jim Burke, they'll be quite a bit further back on here.
If you were swept away, you wouldn't expect them to be any relics at all, would you? Any bits of clothing, would you?
Well, this is odd to me, actually. One just can't tell, you know, until one hears. The trouble is, there are odd bits of, you know,
bits of stuff all over the place.
All over the ruddy place. So whether this is a false alarm or not, but...
Can they drop their headbands immediately in an accident?
I should have thought...
Yes.
Yes, they could do that.
I mean, no, you can't with a rucksack. Can you?
But if it's a strong flowing stream, and if you're, you know, if you're deaf and dumb as well, the whole situation must be that much kind of hideous.
Yeah. But it's odd, I mean, Sherpas don't usually take off their clothes just like that, you know, crossing a stream or anything else. But if he did that, he wouldn't, that means he must have dropped his load as well.
Hello, Adrian, come in, over. Adrian, Roger, can you recover it safely? Over.
Yeah, should be no problem, over.
Would you like a stretcher for carrying the body down to Gorak Shep? Over. Roger, okay, we'll bring a stretcher down straight away. Over. Hello, Mike. Unfortunately, the lad has been drowned. You can come back. Over.
Okay, good. Over now.
One can't help asking oneself, are these big climbs worth the loss of life? I know my own fellow climbers, and I know myself, felt this was very much an expedition accident, and somehow was worse than if it was the climbers or one of our Sherpas, because the poor lad didn't know what he was doing and was such a helpless pawn, really, in the events. But I think everything goes on. The drive to climb the mountain is as great as it ever was. Our determination is as great as it ever was. And this expedition, on as it goes, there'll be really good moments, really happy moments, really wonderful moments, and there'll be some very sad moments too, perhaps. I just pray to God there isn't another accident.
The very next day, following the accident, news came through that Camp 1 had been successfully established.
Roger, that's really good news. That sounds grand. In that case, I see no reason at all why we shouldn't do the move as planned with 24 Sherpas, myself and Adrian coming up tomorrow. Do you know when Hamish and Dougal are planning to drop back? Over. Okay, see you then tomorrow morning, and enjoy your bottle of whiskey tonight. Handing over to Mike now.
Hello, base. This is Mike Chinny speaking. Ready for your requirements. Over.
What's that? More whiskey?
1 bot whiskey. Over. It came up this morning. Wait, I'll ask Adrian which packet was in.
Nick Estcourt
Wait.
had it.
Hello, the bottle of whiskey was with Nick Estcourt. With Nick Estcourt. Over.
Despite the numbing cold, it was vital to move early, before the sun began its work on the great towers of ice that threatened the route. The entire icefall is moving at the rate of 2 feet a day. Every cliff and crevasse of this great tottering maze is bound to collapse sooner or later. For the Sherpas carrying their 40-pound loads, this was to be a daily hazard for the next 5 weeks. During the Japanese expedition in 1969, 6 of them were killed in a single catastrophe.
I think the very fact that as leader of the expedition you're seen to be carrying a load that's as good as, or nearly as good as some of the Sherpas. I was certainly carrying about the same weight as quite a few of the Sherpas. Of course, they'd been doing 3 carries. Also that they see you making the route, trying to make it as safe as possible for them, telling them to get into a safe position, showing that you're concerned, joking and chatting with them. I think all these things help. The Sherpas aren't a solemn people. I don't think they like solemnity. And I think that you can maintain your authority over them and at the same time have a lot of fun.
At this stage, Doug Scott, amongst others, was beginning to feel the frustrations of working in such a large team.
It's a very strong hierarchy set up here, and he is very much the leader. However much you might say he's coordinator, he is the leader. And it's just something within my nature, and I suspect Mick more than to the rest of us. But there's a kind of shop floor mentality develops. Them, the leaders, the foremen, bosses, and us. And however hard you try to suppress it, I think this comes through.
In recent years, the Sherpas too have become much more aware of their status. They run great risks for less than £1 a day, and several Himalayan expeditions have ground to a halt simply because the Sherpas lost confidence in the leadership. But this time, there was no doubt they had complete trust in Bonington, and they showed it by the way they worked. It took 3 hours of strenuous climbing to reach Camp 1 at 20,000 feet. From here, the real Sherpa elite, the high-altitude porters, took over. Many of their fathers and grandfathers had been on earlier Everest expeditions. Camp 1 was built on an island, completely surrounded by enormous crevasses. By the end of the expedition, some of the tents had almost disappeared under the ice. The deputy leader, Hamish McInnes, took charge of the bridge building operations. He described the area around Camp 1 as like a huge sliced loaf slowly opening. In 3 visits to Everest, he had never seen it looking so dangerous.
Tell them to come down with it. Just a bit right over there a bit. Make sure you don't fall through.
What about down there?
No, put one more section on.
While the route was being engineered, Dougal Haston and Doug Scott were out in front, beginning to form a partnership.
Oh, wait a minute. Can we get the Sherpas right up over the bank there so we can pull the ladder? With the rope, okay?
Yes.
Okay, slowly.
Pisari.
Keep it tilted over this a little bit. Over this a little bit. Fire slow to the left. And over the left. Not don't go too much. Let it go over a bit. Right, okay. Turn it over now. Twist it now. Twist it.
In 1953, John Hunt's expedition had brought just one ladder with them. This time, over 100 aluminium sections were hauled up the mountain and slotted into place.
That's fine. Take that rope over there, would you? Oh. Up over behind the camera.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll try and twist it, Alan. Right, up. There we are. Watch it. Let it go. That's fine. Oh, great. Goodbye.
For Mick Burke, this was his second visit to Everest, as cameraman and lead climber.
Hold it, Mick. Hold it. This rope's dangling.
You want to buy a new knife? I borrowed this one. Don't think I'm going to use my own, do you?
I think the thing with Everest is that it'd be very difficult if you didn't come on an expedition and they got up, because then you'd never know whether you would have been one of the people who got up. Whereas if you do come and you don't win the lucky prize in the raffle, at least you were there and you did buy a ticket in the raffle. So you've really got to come. I mean, once you've been once, you've got to come the next time.
Well, it makes no difference what you do. I love you, babe. I don't want to think more. Indeed I do.
By the 29th of August, most of the team were back at base camp. The time had come to break the expedition into separate groups, each with a specific climbing objective. For some, it was to be their last chance of a good meal of fresh vegetables and yak burgers, the speciality of Perna, base camp's resident chef.
Bob, you must have an asbestos stomach.
Beneath the casual atmosphere, there was a good deal of tension. They all knew that their chances of reaching the summit might well be decided in the next few minutes.
Force in another fish cake. A few more. Or a quarter of one, anyway.
Clever bit of attention, please. I spent the last 3 days just about playing around with a permutation of names to sort out what seems to be the best, fairest and pleasantest allocation of roles up to Camp 4. I certainly don't think we want to think beyond what's going to happen at Camp 4, because so many other things can alter as we go. But as far as the run out to Camp 4 goes, of course we've got Hamish and Dougal, Doug and Alan, with Mick Burke filming, up at Camp 1 at the moment, pushing the route through to 2. As soon as they've pushed the route through to 2, Ronnie, who's going up to Camp 1 tomorrow, will join Doug and Alan and Mick to form kind of the first group, and they'll push through to 2 and push the route through to Camp 3. They'll then come back here if they want, and I should imagine they will want, for a rest before coming back up again. The next group, I've called it the B team, which will be pushing the route out from 3 to Camp 4, will be Nick and Tut with 2 Sherpas. The reason why I put 2 Sherpas in with them is that it's a particularly long run, requiring, in fact, quite heavy loads carried by the Sherpas.
And Pertemba, could you pick 2 really good Sherpas to go with Nick and Tut?
From Camp 1, a way had been found up the Western Cwm, and Camp 2 was now established at 22,000 feet. From there, the expedition planned to make 3 camps on the southwest face itself, starting with Camp 3 at 23,000 feet. This site was later abandoned in favour of a slightly higher Camp 4. The route then led up the great central gully to Camp 5, precariously perched below the rock band at almost 26,000 feet. At last, the team had an unobstructed view of the great 7,000-foot southwest face of Everest, which dominated the site of Camp 2 at the head of the Western Cwm. Snow conditions looked very dangerous. For several days, the climbers watched the avalanches pouring off the mountain. The only safe way up seemed to be on the right-hand side. With Doug Scott in the lead, climbing on the face itself began.
Before I got some definite role to play, and I think it must go for a lot of the other lads, you felt, or I felt, that there was this, the leadership, and then there were the rest of us that were being sort of ordered about. And I wasn't always in complete sympathy with the leadership. But as soon as we had a role to play, it was fine. I felt much closer to things. There was something to go for. And I think this was the same throughout, that the kind of underground leadership united with the actual leadership, and we worked as one. And we're fully behind all of Chris's decisions.
As the party moved steadily upwards, they anchored a fixed rope in the snow behind them. This would be the lifeline of the expedition. The porters would use it to haul up their loads. At 23,000 feet, they came to an overhanging rock. This protected ledge had been the site of Camp 3 for 5 previous expeditions. All that remained were a few old ropes, some tins of Japanese bean sprouts, carabiners and long metal ice screws. It was like a museum of mountaineering history.
What an advantage. It's like 16 pounds. It's not bad, is it?
This was to be a special box tent for the highest camp of all.
The door on the side was because of the configuration of the pole, but it's one of these accidental design features, which in fact is quite good. I think it's quite handy having a door on the side, don't you?
Mm-hmm. It's really working quite well, you know. But I don't suppose we'll ever take it down again. When it goes up to Camp 6, it'll stay there, you know.
Well, it doesn't seem to be much point. And anyway, it won't offend the ecologists, because it's going to be blown away within a season anyway.
Yeah, and it's green too, isn't it? They like green colours.
Not very big, of course, but still, it's high altitude bed and breakfast, 27,000 feet. Well, not many houses as high as that.
I was looking at the pictures, and certainly the site looks pretty small. I reckon it's just about the right size for it.
I hope we can guide it down all right. I'd hate to think to blow away whilst the summit party were up the hill and come back and there's no tent. And meantime, it's flown over into Tibet or something.
Oh, that could be quite interesting, yeah.
The route between Camp 1 and Camp 2 passed under the menacing ramparts of Nuptse, an almost vertical wall of ice stretching up to 26,000 feet. To reduce the risk of avalanches, all movement took place in the early morning. But once the sun rose above the summit ridge, it seemed to suck the air out of the reflecting bowl of the Western Cwm, and the climbers found themselves gasping for breath in that great oven of ice.
You look as you've got a big, heavy sack there.
Kept adding bits that I thought you'd like.
Oh, right.
You take it off because
right.
I'm sure they bastard.
This is what Burasabs are for.
Oh, thank you.
We'll go.
Cup of tea.
Right, come and have some tea anyway. You should be surprised to see me here, actually.
Yes, I am, right.
You know, we've had a crisis.
Oh, dear.
We've
Mike and I came down to break the trail for them. Met them at 8 o'clock. About a quarter of the way up.
Yeah?
The avalanche is just starting to trundle.
Oh dear.
But for Bonington, the monsoon had one enormous and unexpected advantage. He found he could count on clear, windless mornings to move up supplies before the regular afternoon snowfall. Not a single day had been lost through bad weather, and incredibly, he was 3 days ahead of his most optimistic forecast. Two gleaming prospects now presented themselves. They had a real chance to climb the mountain before the end of September, and he might also be in a strong enough position to give all his lead climbers a chance for the summit. With very little protection from above, Camp 4 clung to the face at 24,000 feet. Almost as soon as it was established, a snowslide crushed one of the tents. To prevent it happening again, sheets of toughened nylon were stretched over the roofs so that any further falls of ice or rock would shoot right over the top. Camp 2 had now become advanced base camp. From now on, every Sherpa would receive a £5 bonus for carrying a load to Camp 5 and £10 if he reached Camp 6.
I think one of the things that is somehow touches me most of all is the acceptance of my command of these really great mountaineers, because Dougal is a great mountaineer and so is Hamish. And it really, I think it brings the best out of you. I feel a strength in me that I somehow sometimes doubted that I had before the expedition, when I went into the kind of absolute blind stage fright, almost terror of this giant responsibility that I've built up for myself. And yet, I think I have got that strength. I think that whatever happens on this expedition, I think I can bear this expedition. I think I can bear all the problems, all the tragedies that could, thank God they don't happen.
That afternoon, a Sherpa was brought off the mountain.
And that demand valve's working all right, I think, isn't it, PT? It's on 4, it's fine. Great.
Nima was very breathless a few hours ago, blew, coughing a lot, and really looked extremely unwell. We've had him on oxygen, on a demand system, and already he's very, very much better, relaxed, able to sleep, and I've no doubt that he'll make a good recovery. Normally, we'd try to get the patient down to a low altitude as quickly as possible, but it's now late afternoon in the Western Cwm, it's thick cloud, and there are a lot of avalanches coming off Nuptsi, which may cover our route. And I felt that really, as he's made such a very good recovery on oxygen, it's better to weather it the night, give him drugs if necessary, and then take him down tomorrow morning to Camp 1, and then to base camp through the Khumbu icefall. Anyway, you all right now?
Sunday the 14th of September at just about 2:30 p.m. We've just had the 2 o'clock call, and Dougal has just let me know that he thinks he's found the perfect campsite for Camp 5. It's quite different, though, from what we'd originally thought. It's on the right-hand side of the gully. I suppose it must be about 1,000 feet above the original site of Camp 4. It certainly requires quite a lot of different thinking. We could see them today. They were tiny little black dots moving very, very slowly, seemingly, up the big central gully. There was Dougal, Martin and Pete, supported by Angthurban Singh. I think they were quite a long way behind them. Unfortunately, Hamish was forced to return. He got himself involved in a powder snow avalanche very early in the morning. Apparently his oxygen system hadn't been working properly either, and he got back down seemingly quite badly shaken. A lot of powder snow had actually got into his lungs.
For Hamish McInnes, it proved to be the end of his active participation on the climb. Chris Bonington himself now moved up towards the rock band. With him was Mick Burke, whose camera was beginning to be affected by the altitude. For the next phase of the climb, Bonington based himself at Camp 5. He had already decided that it was not the job of the leader to make the first summit assault, but he wanted to keep in close touch with the climbers who were forcing the route. Above him towered the 700-foot precipice of the rock band, which had blocked all previous attempts on the face. From his previous experience in 1972, and from studying photographs of the face, Bonington knew that the only possible route up the rock band would be one of the gullies at the left-hand end. If a way could be forced through this vertical cliff, Camp 6 would be established here for the final push to the summit. The first to attempt this great unclimbed barrier were Nick Estcourt and Tut Braithwaite.
It's just like a big giant Scottish gully. And he went across and found another belay, and I went up.
Then the oxygen
ran out. Shit. It was about 27,000 feet. That was going to burst, so I just panicked.
Yeah, actually more.
Really,
right? 27.5,
yeah. I just panicked. I mean, I didn't myself, there was nothing. And I pulled the mask off and got some, just hung on there and got a pit and hung on to it. And just went on for about another 30 feet. The shock of running out of oxygen and the pitch itself. And I'd have fell off. I got no runners for about 100 feet. It was just too much. And inside, I just panicked. I just didn't know what to do. I just hung on and thought it out. Eventually got my sack off and got the pikes off and all the connections off and got a belay. And Nick came up and was going very, very well. He'd done about 300 or 400 feet without oxygen, slowly.
I was quite, well, comparatively used to going without oxygen now. I mean, you're still, you're like a sort of 105-year-old war veteran or something.
Legs feel just like lead.
Oh, you feel terrible, but at least I had some go left in me. And I started up this gangway, and the first 20 feet or so was quite easy. What it is, there's an overhanging wall like this, and a ramp going across it. And the wall is made of very compact, very hard rock like the rock band. But this is made of very messy, loose rock, covered in, because it wasn't quite vertical, covered in very soft powder. And the only really good hold was I could wedge my arm behind the sort of snowdrift, and you just hope that this great boss of snow would stay there, because you're hanging with most of your weight on it. And I inched my way slowly up this with my arm hooked around this thing, trying to find footholds. And I remember in a state of absolute desperation trying to get a peat-on in, and I scrabbled some snow out from the back, holding on with this part of my arm, scrabbling snow out with that part. And I found a little crack about an inch wide, and I got a peat-on out with an enormously difficult, because snow everywhere, goggles all misted up, absolutely panting helplessly. And I got a peat-on out and put it in this crack, and then had an incredible struggle to get the hammer out of my holster, because it got jammed in my holster for some reason, or I don't know quite why. And I eventually got it out, but I think they thought I was falling off. And
I thought you were falling off.
Yeah. And I wasn't going to give up, because I knew if I gave up trying to do this pitch and he had done it, I'd have been kicking myself for years. Anyway, I eventually got this thing, hammered this peat-on in, and it was obviously useless. But if you pulled it just in one direction, it was safe. So I managed to lean out on it a little bit, walk my feet up, and then walk my other arm in, and then walk my second arm in. And I went on another, I don't know, 30 or 40 feet, not very far.
Just, there's an obvious big shoulder. Right, which was obvious at the top of this, you know, rock band, and it's a rock band really that stopped 7 other expeditions. I hope we found a way through it. I really do.
After 9 days above 25,000 feet, Bonington himself was close to exhaustion, but a year of planning and effort was approaching its climax. They were ready for the final assault.
It's these moments that make Everest so worthwhile. I think there's the tightness of the teamwork that we've managed to achieve, the friendships that we've managed to build, the fascination of the organization. But there's as well this mystical beauty, this mystical kind of experience in yourself that I think it means that when you get back, you'll certainly never be the same person again. You'll certainly never see the world again in quite the same way.
At 3:30 on the morning of September the 24th, Dougal Haston and Doug Scott set out from Camp 6.
You can make the leader very clearly. You can get the occasional flash as well of
you can see him in the naked
dead man he's got.
You can get the occasional flash with a naked eye.
I think they made such fast progress probably across, firstly starting very, very early with the snow conditions in good nick. And of course the line of fixed rope. The only worrying thing is the end of their fixed rope must be at least 400 feet behind them. They've just got that one length of rope with them.
What about the time thing? Oxygen. They've got two.
They've got 2 bottles of oxygen. They've got no problems there. They're very early. You see, they're let's see, 10:15 now. Say they left at they said 3:30. I bet they didn't leave before 5. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Working hard. I reckon they're getting towards the end of their first bottle of oxygen. And the key thing is, I'd say that, I mean, they're 100% certain
of getting to that.
To make the South Summit.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not 100% certain of making the summit. But I should have thought that the second party must make the summit.
Right. And if they don't, third, definitely.
Oh, yeah. Well, with a bit of luck, your third party should have a complete line of fixed rope right the way across the top of the gully.
Down that groove on the left.
Whereabouts?
Yeah.
Through the long lens of the camera, the avalanche looked as if it would engulf them. In fact, it missed them by about 50 yards. As they moved higher up the mountain, the snow conditions became steadily worse, as Doug Scott recalls.
The snow was really bad in this gully. It was soft. We were sank up to our thighs. At one point, we were actually wading with the snow up near our chests. And it took, I suppose, about a couple of hours to get up this gully to the south summit. Well, Dougal was all for bivouacking and getting up 3 o'clock in the morning when the snow might have hardened. But I can't say that I'm at my best at 3 o'clock in the morning, especially after a night up there. And I was all for pushing on there and then. I mean, there was the summit of Everest. And we had got time, it seemed, to reach it before it was actually dark.
The watchers at Camp 2 were growing anxious. For 6 hours, there'd been no sign of them, and by late afternoon, it began to look as if they must have turned back.
Hey, there's lumps of snow falling off the top of that spur above, and they're still going uphill.
I thought I saw somebody kicking steps, you see.
There's something, there's odd lumps of snow.
Right at the top of that spur,
That little step, look. Yeah. You see snow blowing off?
Yes, and to the right there's a body.
Now watch, and every so often you'll see a lump of snow fall down. They're still going uphill.
Time shortened. I mean, there's no way they can get back to their camp.
It was now certain that the pair would have to spend the night on top of Everest. The chances of surviving without frostbite were remote.
Hello, Pete. Now, I think this means that your role tomorrow could well possibly, rather than being a summit role, could be a rescue one. It is absolutely essential that you get the 3 reels of rope up to Camp 6, and I think perhaps start, if ideally tomorrow, actually roping out towards the the gully leading up towards the south summit, because it's just possible they'll be in a very bad way when they come back. Is that understood? Over.
They now knew that Haston and Scott were trying for the summit that night. The last serious obstacle was the Hillary Step, a rock buttress encased in snow.
After the Hillary Step, the angle of the ridge was quite gentle, like a huge whaleback, and we took it in turns to break trail through the crusty snow. Great slabs of snow would break off and tumble down towards the Western Cwm on our left.
Then, to their astonishment, they saw the strange metal tripod left by the Chinese expedition in the spring. A few more steps, and they were on the summit of Everest.
Well, I suppose we got there just at the absolute best time possible. It was a bit awe-inspiring being there just before dark, and then you've got to get back somewhere to sleep. But we did see the most incredible sunset, far better than any sunset I've ever seen in the mountains before. And we're looking down on the sun setting. Well, it seemed to set several times because there were layers of cloud that kept drifting in, and the sun would explode behind them. And then it was casting Everest's shadow right into Tibet, and that was all purple and brown in Tibet, and then there was all white going pink in Nepal. It was just a fantastic sight.
Next morning, at Camp 2, they still had no idea whether the two men had reached the summit or perished in the night. Then at 7:30, the radio crackled into life.
Hello, Doug. It's
Great to hear you. Did you make it? Over. Yes, we started up over at 6 o'clock last night, just as the sun was setting. Fantastic evening. Wonderful, Doug. Congratulations from every single one of us. How are you? How are you? Over. Roger, okay. Do you think you've got any frostbite? Over. No, I don't think so. We had a very miserable bivouac at the Mount summit last night. Well, that really is wonderful news, Doug. The other lads will probably be with you very soon. Do you want to, why not put a brew on now, get yourselves warmed up? We're on open it, we're listening out the whole time, so as soon as you've got yourself sorted out, you can come back to us. But meanwhile, congratulations from every single one of us. Well done.
As Haston and Scott prepared to descend from Camp 6, 8 more of Bonington's lead climbers were already moving up, hoping for their chance at the summit.
It's a difficult problem for me now. We've climbed the mountain, we've got success, but obviously my other lead climbers want a chance at having a go at it. And each one of them is raring to go. So I think I'm going to have to, provided the high winds don't come in, and there's a sign both from the long distance forecast and also the way the winds are scudding over the top of Everest and Lhotse, that the winter winds are beginning to arrive. But I think I've got to let them have their go.
No expedition had ever climbed Everest in so short a time or by such a difficult route. The two men had spent the previous night on the south summit of the mountain at 28,700 feet, the highest bivouac in the history of mountaineering and one of the coldest.
Had a good scramble, lad. Great, lad. Well done. Well done.
Oh, it really is great. Well done. It really is terrific.
We've got some incredible views.
Oh,
just never seen sunsets like them.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Damn.
What's it like down in Tibet?
Oh, very brown. But more, greatest interest is the Chinese flag there, like a little maypole. Objected at first, but when we realised it was Chinese, I thought, well, great.
I wonder how cold it was. Must have been in the -20s.
We just didn't relax. The whole night was spent with the boots off.
Yeah. Or massaging your feet.
Yeah, you knew if you slipped off this slumberland, your feet would go.
And you kept your feet warm against each other's tummies all night, more or less.
Playing around with feet and boots.
Yeah.
All works.
Doug's feet were colder than mine at one point.
Well, I've never had a night like that one. It was every bone, every muscle was cold right throughout the night. In fact, we went on enlarging the snow hole just to keep warm.
I'm too worried about it.
Because that one looks a bit as if it may form a black cap.
Black and stuff.
Look after it, but you obviously won't lose anything. And that one much the same. And by that finger looks as if it's going to form a blister, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It had been Dougal Haston's faulty oxygen set which nearly defeated the first attempt. By the time Martin Boyson checked his own mask for the second assault, only 5 of the original 18 sets were still working. At such altitudes, no one with defective equipment has much chance for the summit. By the evening of the 25th, the weather was beginning to break.
I was more tense, I think, than I'd been at any other time during the expedition, even during the summit bed. I was definitely unhappy about this second attempt. Mick Burke, for instance, had been up there at Camp 5 now for 9 days, and I'd actually, when I went down for a rest myself just a couple of days before, I had tried to persuade him to come back down with me, but he was confident that he was going well, and he convinced me that he'd be all right, but I still had that lurking doubt in my mind.
He is going so slowly that there would be a situation where he must be left behind. And if he was left behind, something serious could go wrong.
Pete Boardman heard the message at Camp 6.
We agreed with Chris during our radio conversations that perhaps we should try and dissuade him. Then, at 4 o'clock, all of a sudden the rope jerked. Mick came into the box, and he was just Mick. He wasn't a tired Mick at all. He was just the chirpy, bright Mick that always seems to be able to pace himself and keep going. He just didn't question the fact that he'd be going for the summit. And when you're at Camp 6, anything that anybody says when they're 6,000 feet lower down, whether it's advice, orders, or anything, it's apart from you. And there's nothing really that from down there that could stop you if you really wanted to go for the top.
Next morning, at first light, the 4 men set out for the summit. Mick Burke, Pertemba, Martin Boyson, and Pete Boardman.
Martin was going first, and he was only going about 3 or 4 paces at a time, and he sort of mumbled through his oxygen mask how he wasn't going well, and screamed at me to take over. We exchanged a few words through oxygen masks, and I overtook him.
Eventually I reached this rock step, and Mick caught me up. I thought, well, I'll struggle up this rock step first, and then, you know, if Mick's going faster, he can overtake me as well. And I struggled, and I just wasn't working at all well, and eventually I noticed a crampon had dropped off. And then I noticed on my other foot that it was also without a crampon. So I in fact lost 2 crampons on this rock step. One I picked up, and the other one I just saw gently rolling down the slope. I thought, oh God, that's it. You know, I might as well turn back. And Mick, he saw this and said, oh, hard luck, old son. You know, that's it. Cheerio. And I said, well, wished him good luck with as good a feeling as I could manage. And I staggered back in the dark to the tent, and the others went off. We just kept on plodding across. It's quite a long ascending traverse line towards the gully up towards the south summit. Fortunately, there was a nice friendly fixed rope over the rock step in which Dougal and Doug had left. I woke up about 11 o'clock, and might have been a bit earlier, And I looked out, very, very windy, and I could see two figures on the summit of the south summit, and I could see one figure some way below going up to the south summit, which obviously was Mick. And really I thought, well, that's it, they've cracked it.
We still thought we got plenty of time to go on towards the main summit, and visibility still not very good all the way along there, about 50, 60 feet perhaps, but the sun was shining through the clouds and there was no major spindrift covering our steps, so we thought we were still fairly justified in carrying on.
I, of course, couldn't see them by that time, and but I was getting a little bit worried because the weather was really turning nasty. The wind had been getting up all day. Clouds had been coming in, and in fact it was beginning to snow. And that was at Camp 6, and on the summit, obviously, it would be a lot more severe, the conditions, the wind especially.
We plodded up to the summit. I sort of sat down about 10 foot below it, and I waved up Pertemba. We both felt very pleased and happy to be up there. And after about half an hour, 40 minutes, we started off back down again. Very confident that we were going to have a nice sort of leisurely, safe descent. And all of a sudden we saw Mick. I thought it was Martin at first. I hadn't expected Mick to have been going so strongly and keenly. So it was great to see him. We exchanged a few words. He seemed very strong, and he wanted us to go back to the summit to film. But as we were moving, roped, taking a bit more time, we also wanted to conserve our energy for the way down. We said, well, no, we'll go on. He filmed us a bit. We said, you want to come? He said, oh, I'm near now, I'll go up. That was the summit. So we said, all right, and in fact, he said, well, will you wait for me at the south summit? So we said, oh, yeah, sure. We'll wait for you down there. And we set off again, and within the next half an hour, the weather really deteriorated considerably. The winds didn't increase all that much, but it started spin drifting very fiercely. We couldn't find it very difficult to see. The snow started covering up our steps, and the weather was really very bad when we reached the south summit. But that was within half an hour, say, of having met Mick. So I thought, we'll just have to wait a few minutes here for Mick to catch us up, and we'll go down with him. And in fact, we waited there over an hour and a quarter. I don't know how long it was, an hour and 20 minutes. And we waited there until 4 o'clock.
It was howling gale. Snow was really rattling down, the tents were rattling. And I began to get extremely worried at that point, because I was thinking, well, if they don't actually get back, or if they miss the ropes due to the whiteout conditions or anything else, then if they have to stay a night out in that weather, then I thought that's going to be extremely serious. They could very, very easily die. The probability would be that they would die, in fact.
We could see about 5 feet at this time. The snow was icing up our eyes, and we just felt we had to go. We just couldn't wait any longer, because with the weather being as it was, we'd have never survived a night out there.
I was in a hell of a state. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to get out there and get me things on and go out up the ropes or what, or whether that would be useless or not. I didn't think I could really give them much help, quite honestly. But anyway, so I thought, well, the best thing to do is to put a brew on anyway and get some tea just in case they are coming.
5 o'clock came, and they hadn't come back, and I started worrying very much.
It was getting virtually dark when I suddenly saw 2 oxygen cylinders, which I knew was the end of the fixed rope. And we went just before, as I was moving towards them, we got in a big spindrift avalanche where it hit me. BT dug his ice axe in and belayed. I just hung on, and it lasted a long time. It was the sort of thing you couldn't have survived if you weren't wearing an oxygen mask. And eventually got to the end of the fixed ropes, and we just stumbled along those, and it was dark by that time.
Eventually I heard a sort of crunch in the snow, and I popped my head out of the tent, and I saw Pete sort of really quite sort of staggering in with his face. Obviously, it wasn't a sort of jubilant face. It was a face of, you know, horror, really. And I immediately asked, you know, how many of there are you? And he said, there's myself and PT. I said, where's Mick? He said, oh, God knows. And so, really, I just dragged him into the tent and took his crampons off, and he was attached to PT by a rope. And PT, it was about 10 minutes before PT actually came in, and he was struggling, and he looked in a far worse state than Pete. He looked absolutely near the end, really.
Martin's voice came on the radio, and I immediately knew that something was drastically wrong, because if all three of them had been back, his voice would have been full of jubilation and happiness. And he said something like, I've got something to let you know, Chris. Pete Boardman and Pertemba are back, and I'll now put Pete onto the radio. And then Pete told us everything that had happened.
There was a strange mixture of emotions as they came back down towards us. I think there's no doubt about it that I think any of the lead climbers would have probably done what Mick had done and gone for the summit on their own, because everything seemed to be right at the time, and Mick just took a calculated risk that I think any climber would have done.
Well done, Pete. Congratulations, Pete.
There was a feeling of very real sadness at the death of a good friend, but at the same time there was a deep feeling of satisfaction. We'd all put so much into this expedition. We'd had our previous attempt in 1972. We'd spent a year of planning, of real hard graft, of actually getting the expedition together. And then, of course, there was the climb itself, and I think everyone had pushed themselves harder than I've ever known before. But I think most important of all, we'd been a very happy expedition, and I think to me this was even more important than our success.